Hello YouTube. Today we will be working on replacing the back brakes on a 2013 Dodge Journey RT. Now I did want to note that the RT and the Crew models of the Dodge Journey have different size rotors compared to the standard version. So the SEs and the SELs will have smaller rotors than these. Now these particular vehicles have, I believe, 285 millimeter rotors on them. So much to my surprise, when I originally ordered rotors, I had it all in pieces and went to match it up, and I was like, wow, these rotors are smaller than what they should be. So that doesn't happen to you. Make sure when you go to the auto parts store that you get the correct size rotors. Now note, when you're doing rear brakes, okay, the Dodge Journey is different than most of any other vehicle that has rear brakes. Normally when you're dealing with doing rear brakes, your parking brake, which is still true, you cannot have your parking brake set, but the parking brake is a drum brake shoe inside of the rotor. The Journey does not function that way. The Journey's parking brake is actually attached to the rear side of the caliper, and it still functions through the caliper itself. So that's one thing that is nice about this, that you'll never have to replace any type of brake shoe. So a note, once you set this up, you also need your jacks and jack stands. You lift up on the rear lift points. I'm using the support directly behind the wheel, and then I have my jack stand set up on the frame in case if the jack relieves pressure, it's not going to fall down and crush me. Also, because I can't set my rear brake, and with park being on, I don't entirely trust it, I took a set of ramps and I stuck it behind both front tires to ensure that this doesn't roll back on me. I also opened up the hood and removed the cap to the power steering, or not to the brake reservoir, because as you collapse those pistons back in, and you can see I just did the front brakes, that's why this is overflowing right now, because it's pushing all that fluid back up through and it's starting to overflow. So I have the cap off to allow it to flow much better. Now once I get both of those in, I'll come back up front and I'll drain out some of this additional fluid. I'll either use a shop towel or a vampire to get the additional fluid so that I get down to the appropriate max line that where we're supposed to be at. Anyways, the equipment that you're going to need in order to do this, okay, is you're going to need a 19 millimeter lug. I have a 4-way representing it, because each one of these lugs themselves are a 19 millimeter, so you'll need a 19. If you're using a lug, make sure that you get them initially loose before you put the jack under and jack up the car, because otherwise you will not be able to get this done. But if you do happen to make that mistake and you have the car jacked up, just step on the e-brake, okay? Step the e-brake down, that'll lock this rear end, and then you can still brake it free. I personally have air tools, in which case, again, my 19 millimeter socket, you can see, is going to fit in just fine for that, and that's how I'm going to get that off. Now, there's no particular way that when you take the tire off, there's no particular way you have to take it off, but when you're putting it back on, you have to use what's called the cross pattern. If it's a 6-point, again, you go directly across, but since these are 5 points, it's easier just to say skip every other one. So when I'm putting it on, I'm going to hand thread each one of these once I have the tire on, and then I just go across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I go back again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's how I get these back on, to make sure that that's torqued down. If you go across, what will happen is these two will seat, and it'll cause the wheel to pitch, and you may end up having it seated with an uneven pitch, which one can start tearing up the stud behind it if it should ever start to reseat itself, or 2, it'll most definitely tear up the tread on your tire. That's why you want to use the cross pattern itself. And again, with 6 points, it's almost the exact same, except you just skip 2. So it's across and then jump, and then across and then jump, and then across and then jump. So that's how you're supposed to seat these. So in addition to your 19 millimeter socket, okay, you're going to need a 13 millimeter wrench. That's going to help take the back end of the caliper off. Now, if you're replacing the rotor itself, you're also going to need a couple of hammers a screwdriver so that you can get in and try to pry on some things. And for this, the nuts on the back of the caliper support is actually going to be an 18 millimeter as opposed to the front end, which was a 21. So this one's going to be an 18, and I'll show you later once I get the caliper off that this plugs into the back on the nuts for the caliper support, and that's how you get to the rotor. In addition, if you're doing that, you're also going to, if you're doing brakes, you're also going to need a set of needle nose pliers, because now that the parking brake is integrated into the caliper itself, there's a spring on the back of the caliper that you're going to have to grab and unhook. That way you can disconnect the caliper itself to get off. In addition, you'll need your disc brake tool set or a C-clamp. Okay, I personally am more fond of the C-clamp. It's easier to use than what the disc brake tool set. If you watch my replacing the front brakes, you pretty much see why. But if I open this up, you'll see essentially all it is a press, a backing, and then various different settings that I can put onto the caliper to press the two pistons back in. But it's much easier doing it the other way, just throwing a pad on and C-clamping it down, which I'll again show you how to do in this video. So we'll go with the video, and what we'll do is we'll start off and grab my air tool. Okay, I got my parts laying here. Everything's good to go. I'm grab my 19 millimeter socket. I'll set this on my air tool, and then we're going to get good to hook. And again, we're going to break this free. Sure, we're set for reverse. And it doesn't matter again when you're coming up. It doesn't really matter. You just grab them and go. Now sometimes when you grab the tires to get them off, they might be rust welded to the rotor itself. So if you just put a hand up top here and down at the very bottom, you just want to kick the edge, that'll break the tire free from that. Now this time it came loose very easily. Sometimes it will take several good shots. Sometimes you'll just loosen it and it'll come apart. Inside the tire, I like to use it as my workspace so I don't lose any of my parts. So I take my parts, my lug nuts I put in the center, and then as I take bolts off, I'll lay them each in one of these indentations so I don't lose them. Now remember when I was telling you about the spring, okay? This cable right here, this is your parking brake cable. You can see it goes right into the back of your caliper, which is right here. Your brake pads are right here, and then this thing right here, this is your rotor itself. All right, the rotor will sometimes rust to the wheel hub, which is located here, which is why you have the hammer. Sometimes you just need to smack it real good. A rubber mallet sometimes can pop it loose, but other times you got to get steel. I've had some that were so rust welded I had to hit it with a 15-pound sledgehammer and ended up cracking the rotor itself to pop it off. If you end up having to whack it with a sledgehammer, be very cautious when you're doing it, because you could crack the wheel hub, so make sure that you're checking that. Usually just a regular hammer should be sufficient for you to pop this rotor right off. Now once we're down to this point, our next step is we're going to get out our needle nose pliers. I'm going to work down here on the back. Not sure if you can see, right here is the start of my hook, and then take it off. All right, so now that I have my little spring off, I'll just set that down, and you will have to remember to put that back on a little bit later. Next step is to move in, and we're going to start working off the caliper. This is your 13 millimeter caliper nut. These are your friction pins here, which allow the caliper a little bit of play so that it doesn't lock up or it doesn't seize. In this case, since the bolts are facing the opposite direction, since they're coming towards me, I need to actually torque to the right to loosen instead of to the left to loosen. So if you'll see from my perspective, turning to the right to loosen them. And once I got it broken free, I'll loosen it up a little bit, and then I'm going to switch down here to the bottom Or again, I need to rotate to the right to loosen. Once I have it on, just gotta grab it, break it free. Alright, and once you have it broken free, take the screws out from where the friction pins hold it in. Alright, and we'll again, back to my workspace, set it down. Now because this has this cable, I want to work from the bottom to the top. Normally I stick a screwdriver in and pop it top down. In this case I'm going to work bottom to top. And get myself a standard head screwdriver, slide it in right under this lip and pry it up. Okay, now you can see when I pried it up, that loosened this cable right here. I just continue to pull up and out until I got it loose. Alright, and now my cable is loose and I'm good to go with the rest of my work. Alright, and then here's your pads themselves. So we will take on and get in here and pop your pad out. You move in to your back side and pop your pad out. Okay. Now once you have your pads out, now we got to get to the area where we're going to get the rotor out. And that's going to be these bolts back here. Now these bolts will sometimes rust and they can be a real bear to get off. So make sure you got a long enough wrench to try to break them free. Now I may end up having to pause the video I did last time because just me using one-handed, it wasn't quite enough. Yep. So I'm going to have to pause the video so I can use both hands to break that nut free. Alright, I'll be right back. Alright, again, once you got it broke free, in my case it took me 2 hands to get it, but I got it free. Now it's just a matter of backing it out and getting the caliper brace removed. Okay, I got my bolt out. Again, I'll stick that down there. Got that set. And I'm going to work on my other caliper bolt. Get my caliper bolt out. Or not the caliper bolt, but the bracket bolt out. And right there is the bracket. Now I can take my caliper, I can move it to where I can work. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my C-clamp on it so it clamps down on the back side here and then to the front caliper, but I need 2 hands to do that, so I'm just going to pause this for a minute and I'll be right back. Alright, as you can see, I get my C-clamp I pressed on, I have it on the bolt, the underside, it's sitting right there, sitting on the caliper face, and I run straight up. And all you gotta do is just twist the top right here, and that will compress your caliper piston. You can see that's going in as I compress. Now, I know there's probably going to be a million questions, or at least a million posts about using brake and parts cleaner. As said in my previous video, I'm not a big fan of brake and parts cleaner because it's a very harsh alcohol, and harsh alcohols tend to make these rubber gaskets and seals very, very brittle. So if you're adamant about cleaning it off, get yourself a good stiff bristle plastic brush and brush it off. All right. Other than that, the only time you'd use the brake and parts cleaner is when you initially pull the rotor out of the bag. If it's covered in grease or anything else, yeah, you're going to want to get that grease off. But so far, from what I've seen, none of my rotors have been covered in grease, so I'm not going to use any brake and parts cleaner. All right, that's flat. I just back off my C-clamp. And what we have is a fully reset caliper, all using a $5 C-clamp. No need to buy the $20 or $30 caliper tool set, or even try to rent it from the auto parts store. It's just unnecessary. Alright, now we're going to move that off to the side. Now the caliper is off to the side. We're going to take this rotor, we're going to try to get it free, and just like I said before, it's going to rust weld right here around the wheel hub. So we just need to take our hammer and do a couple of good shots to get it to break free. And once you got it broke free, now you have your wheel hub exposed. Again, if you want to clean, just a good brush on that. Don't use any oils, degreasers. And if you want to use some brake and parts cleaner, that's fine, but it's just going to rust again the moment you get water in there anyway. So, I mean, I just wipe it off with my fingers because it's gone right back on. And then the moment water starts saturating, all it does is rust anyway. So it's not going to be any problem getting it on. Some people will say, well, you have to lubricate it or do something else to make sure it goes on easy. Let's see, with the brand new rotor on the back end, it's already going to go on very, very easily. So, dig out my brand new rotor. As you can see, I don't have any grease or any reason to use a brake and parts cleaner on this, because I don't have any lubricants on it or any reason that this would need a brake and parts cleaner. Again, align it with the studs. Yep, put it right on. There it is. Your rotor is good, on and set. You want to take your rotor bracket or your caliper bracket and put that back on. I'm going to need two hands to do that, so unfortunately I'm going to have to pause this video, but it's the same thing. It's this caliper bracket right here. Okay, these rubber grommets for the static pins, you're going to want facing outward or facing towards your coil, which this is your coil, so you're going to have the rubber piece facing towards the coil, and you're going to line them in the back so that the bolt hole goes underneath the other one, and then you'll feed your bolts back through and then to anchor it down. So I'll be with you in 1 minute.